All right, let's jump to a little sports, John. NCAA football, right? It kicked off. It actually kicked off 2 weeks ago, but it's kicked off now. Now, here's the interesting part about 2 weeks ago. Well, what was the first game? Well, it was a big one. Florida State was going to be stepping out. They had Georgia Tech as an opponent. They were a great team last year. Everybody was so mad at me and anybody else who said they didn't deserve to go to the playoff.
They didn't play anybody.
And I still stand by it, John, because, okay, they're an ACC team. That's fine. And they had a really good record. That's fine. You lost the best player on your team, which meant you were going to get drubbed when you got to the next level. And you look at it, it's not fair to really compare what they did do because everybody stepped away that was going to be going to the NFL, and they didn't play in the game, which is a soft position, I think. That's really a soft thing to do at your school. But nonetheless, they had a great quarterback, had a great year, and they decided, you know what, you're not going to go because your backup quarterback ain't that good. Well, we got a chance to see the backup quarterback. He ain't that good. They're 0-2 to start off the season, John. They haven't played well. Boston College didn't just beat them. They controlled the game. They ran for something like 270 yards. They had the ball 52 for 100 or 263 yards. This is Florida State. How are they that bad that Boston College just reamed them? I mean, it's one of those things where I think it makes a lot more sense now for anybody who was pushing back on this. When you lose somebody as good as the quarterback they had, things change. Now, can you replace him? Sure. Is he as good? Maybe. But in this case, I'd say no. Do you know who it is? It's the kid who can't stay at his school because nobody seems to like him, John. He was at Clemson. He's at Oregon State. Now he's playing over there at Florida State. And he's not getting it done. The defense isn't getting it done. And that coach, they started off number 10 in the country. You know where they are now? I don't either, because it's probably like number 70 by now at an 0-2 start.
Yeah, well, Pete, how about the U crushing Florida? Mm-hmm. And then all the University of Miami players, J.C. Peretz, I'm talking to you. Our friend J.C. Peretz, Pete, from All-Star Charts, he goes back and forth with me about the U because he went to the U. And my God, that was funny as heck, Pete. Florida had all these recruits on the sideline, mm-hmm. and all the U players were going over saying, "You should come over here. Don't go there. You should come here with us. We're going to be the next power." And you know what? I think they could be, Pete.
Yeah.
Obviously, they know how to do NIL because they were doing NIL before it was legal.
Surprise, surprise.
If you don't think the U can go out there and recruit some players and pay them, and is Coral Gables more fun than Gainesville? Probably. I'd say be careful.
Yeah, I'll tell you, a good friend of ours, I won't mention his name on here because he might not want me to talk about it, but he said, you know what? That just gave Miami the opportunity to hit some of those big hitters that are graduates of their NIL money, since there's no cap, which is the stupidest thing ever. Their NIL money might jump to something like $50 million. And I'm not exaggerating, because where are all these superstars in the crypto world? Well, a lot of them are in Florida. A lot of them went to Miami, and a lot of them want to support the Hurricanes. So it could get pretty interesting, John, and they could become that same power they once were back in the days of Schnellenberger and all the rest of the great coaches that came out of there. All right, next up. Now, the best games this past week, we finally had the real week. I mean, we had a sloth of just unbelievable games. A lot of them were blowouts because people were playing people they probably shouldn't. But next week, this coming weekend, we've got Michigan going up against Texas, John. Now, Michigan looked okay, probably okay at best against Fresno State, who's not necessarily a power. Good quarterback, good receiver, good running back, but it's Fresno State, and this is Michigan who won the national title. Now, they lost a lot of players, different coach, a lot of things changed at Michigan. They're going to host Texas. Yours might be the best quarterback this year, I think, in football. We'll have to see how it all plays out. It's one game in, but he did play last year, obviously, and he's been a high. We've all talked about guys like him and Arch Manning. Arch Manning looked great as well. So they are deep, John. I think that game should be absolutely, that might be the best game of this coming week. But I got one that's near and dear to you that I want to throw out there. Colorado. So Colorado beat somebody. They didn't beat them up. And they were a FCS school that's won a lot of national titles at the next level. But nonetheless, North Dakota State, they went down to Colorado and they put a big hurting on them. Now, they didn't win. Colorado won, and I'm sure, your buddy Neon Dion was going to be dancing around doing that silly little stuff that he does or whatever. But now they got to go to Nebraska. Now, last year, he had the big issue with Nebraska stepping on top of the Buffalo. And then, of course, he had the nerve to have his own players doing that at Oregon, and they got their butt whooped.
Yeah.
that Oregon coach Lanning, John, he looked at that and goes, really? It wasn't okay when Nebraska did that to you, but it's okay to come out here to Oregon and do that to us, huh? All right. They put a whooping on them, and now they're going back up to Nebraska. Now, I guarantee you somebody from Colorado stands somewhere on the big end and tries to scrape their feet on there just to show that they don't like them, right? But however it plays out, Nebraska went in with a freshman quarterback, the highest level quarterback coming into this year. Raiola, I think his father was the one, maybe it's his uncle, I think it's father, who played at Nebraska, offensive lineman, big, tough son of a gun. Anyway, that kid had a great game this past week. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. But Nebraska's got a team that looks like they can run the ball. They got a team that looks like they can probably throw the ball pretty well, which is a little bit unusual. This is going to be an interesting game because what if they knock out Colorado right out of the gate, who went back to the Big 12 this year? It's going to be a very competitive Big 12 this year. They can't afford to lose to Nebraska. And I'm going to say it right now. Nebraska beats them. What do you think?
Well, Nebraska's a 7.5-point pick. So Pete's not exactly going out on the edge here, folks.
I didn't even know that. I figured it was a pick-em.
7.5-point pick. But I'll tell you what has to happen, in my opinion, Pete, because Colorado, even though Neon Dion was primarily a defensive player, offensive threat, sure. Punt returns, kick returns, that's offense. It's not, the offense, 11 guys lined up to run the ball or pass, but he would occasionally line up as a slot back or a wide receiver. I get it, but he is a defensive back. He doesn't have a defense at Colorado, Pete. I mean, last year they beat Nebraska. I think Nebraska was surprised by how good Shadur and Hunter were and how they just tore them up. This year, their defense looks as bad as it did last year, Pete, against good teams. Against the Bison, North Dakota State, they didn't look great.
Nope.
They let them score, 26, 28 points, something like that. So I'd say Colorado needs turnovers to win. And like you said, Raiola, don't know if he's going to do that. But on the run defense, they got none. They got no answer. Hopefully the defensive coordinator, Pete, will have them slanting a lot or doing something to try to fill the gaps there because they don't have the big thumping defensive guys that you need to shut down a big, strong running game like Nebraska. And those big farm boys, they love to just plow ahead, just like Kansas State, just like Kansas. Those three teams usually have big, strong offensive lines. And like I say, I think it's without turnovers, they do lose by 7 to 10 points.
Yeah, I didn't even know that line. I didn't, I swear.
But Shadur, on the other hand, he's going to put up some points.
Yep.
So I don't think that Nebraska's defense is going to be able to shut him down, Pete. So I'd say Nebraska will probably win, and it could even be another game just like the Bison last week. It could be reversed though. Colorado might score 26 and Nebraska scores 30 because I don't know if they can stop them from running, and I don't know if they're going to let Raiola throw a lot, especially since Hunter plays every single down, Pete. That kid didn't leave the field. That's how good he is.
Yeah.
And he did the same thing last year. It's not a new thing. So watch that kid. He is something to behold, and that kid should be a Heisman candidate for sure.
Oh, for sure. He definitely should. I don't know if Shadur should, but he should. Hunter should be up for it. I think.
Both ways. He could be All-American at either position, Pete.
The North Dakota State quarterback, John, threw for 277 yards against Colorado, by the way. Cam Miller is his name. He also led his team in running. I mean, North Dakota State is no joke. And I think that Colorado didn't have any idea how good they really were. Matter of fact, North Dakota State was up at halftime 20-17. So they were actually leading at halftime and then slipped back a little bit. I'll tell you what, Nebraska put up 500 yards. They actually held, now it's Fresno State, let's be honest. But
it was UTEP, right?
UTEP, excuse me, UTEP. Yeah, UTEP. I said the wrong one. Their defense, however, I don't know if they're black shirts or not. It's way too early, but they held them to 200 yards, and they put up 500 yards. And a lot of it was passing, but they also averaged about 4.5, 5 yards a carry. So this might be, Coach Rule is doing a hell of a job recruiting. This might be a Nebraska of old this year because they brought in some horses. They went into the portal, and they looked I think they look different than they did last year. And last year, they just were a team that was brand new coach, all of that, lost a lot of people to the portal. This year, I think they gained in the portal, and I think they're a much better football team for sure.
Well, I'm going to say two things real quick, Pete.
Mm-hmm.
One, Nebraska, the reason they went out of gas, not Nebraska, I'm sorry, North Dakota, is because you're playing at altitude. And you and I talked about that already.
Yeah.
So one advantage Colorado has coming from altitude to Nebraska is even though it's going to be hot, probably in Nebraska, they're running downhill because they've been training at altitude, if you will. Yep. So you got to factor that in. Second, we'll have to cover this tomorrow, Pete. But the freaking Clemson Tigers, oh my, apparently they're going to need to open that portal next year because they're not in the same league with, now granted, it's Georgia, Pete.
It's Georgia.
It's
best
a
team.
really good football team, but they didn't deserve to be on the field with them.
No, they were a little bit of an embarrassment for the ACC along with Florida State, right? I mean, so it kind of makes things not look so great. Cal actually looked pretty good. They didn't play anybody, but they played pretty well, actually. That's an ACC team for the people who don't know it. They ain't in the Pac-12 anymore, John. They're in the ACC, but they happen to be on the West Coast,
Just happen to be, because it makes so much sense.